Hey pals, so I'm here today to talk about all of the non-fiction books I have on my physical TBR. It is Non-Fiction November coming up. I'm sure many of you participate. If you haven't heard of Non-Fiction November, I will link Olive's video down below. Olive created Non-Fiction November and it runs every year in November, and it is a month where you're encouraged to read more non-fiction than you usually do. There are 4 prompts which you can use, but you don't have to, but of course you can go and hear about those prompts in Olive's video. So when thinking about Non-Fiction November, I was thinking, oh, what books would I really like to get to in the month? And so I was having a look at all the non-fiction books I could potentially read, and I realised there was only 20. And so I thought, do you know what, I should probably just talk about all 20 in a video and then hope that you guys will help me by telling me, like, if you've read these, if you enjoyed them, if you didn't enjoy them. I'm always happy to hear positive and negative things about books on my TBR because I need help narrowing it down. And also if you have heard really good things about them, or if you have ones you'd like to hear about more than others, just all these things. And so yeah, I thought we'd go through them all. They're sort of split into 3 groups. I have 8 books that I've owned since before the start of 2021, which is really low. I'm really pleased with that. I've got my physical TBR down to 31 books. Officially, I wanted it to be 0 by the end of this year. That probably isn't going to happen. If it gets down to 15, I'll be like over the moon with that. I don't even know if that's going to happen because I have a lot of new books and library books I'm also very excited about, and I'm not reading very quickly at the moment, but that could change. We shall see. Wishful thinking. And then I have 6 books out from the library at the moment that are non-fiction, and then I have 6 books that I've either purchased this year or have been given by publishers this year that I haven't yet read. So yeah, and then clearly my actual non-fiction TBR in terms of all the books I'd like to read is like hundreds of books long, including audiobooks and all of that, but that would be like, I don't even know how long that video would be. So instead I'm just going to focus on these 20, and these are the ones I will pick from in the month of November. So these first 3, I think I picked all of these up in 2020, and they're the only books non-fiction wise that I bought in 2020 but haven't yet read, I think. The first one being Blacklisted, Black British Culture Explored by Boakye, and I think this sounds brilliant. So this is a book that looks at all the different terms that black identity is given through a list of insults, insights and everything in between. It says it takes a panoramic look at global black history and contemporary culture and investigates the ways in which black communities and individuals have been represented, oppressed, mimicked, celebrated and othered. And I started this on audio and I loved his narration, but I thought it would really help to see all these words actually written down, so I picked up a physical copy. It's split into lots of different groups. So we have the politically correct descriptors, derogatory terms, loaded terms, terms of endearment, internal insults, outlaw accolades, the black masculinity trap, and in discussing each of those words, the author also tells us a bit about the history and the context in particular in Britain of those words. So yeah, I've had really good things about this and definitely want to read this one before the end of the year. And then when I actually started, and I think I got about a third of the way through this one, I'm not quite sure why I didn't continue, but I plan to, whenever I do pick it up, start from the start again. And that is I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying by Bassey Ikpi. This is a memoir in essays. So the author is a Nigerian American immigrant, a black woman, a slam poet, a mother, a daughter, an artist. And this book is told through the lens of her mental health and diagnoses of bipolar 2 and anxiety. And from the sections I read, there's lots of discussion about her mother's diagnosis, I think also with bipolar 2, and then her finding out about her own diagnosis, and it's sort of told out of order. I think she writes beautifully. This was a really celebrated memoir when it came out, so it's one I definitely need to pick back up and read in full. And then the third and final book was one I was sent by the publishers in 2020, and it looks a little bit dusty, and that is Between Light and Storm, How We Live with Other Species by Esther Woolfson. I really like the sound of this, and to be honest, the only reason I haven't really been more pushed to pick it up is because I haven't had a single person talk about it. And when I pick books up and then they sort of sit there, when someone talks about it, it sort of reminds me that I have it and I should read it, and because I haven't heard anyone talk about it, it has very few reviews on Goodreads, I just haven't got around to it. But it is a topic I'm really interested in, and it's definitely one that I would like to read. And I feel like this could be a fairly quick read. The font's fairly big, and when I read the first few pages it felt quite readable, so this could be sort of an easier read out of the 20. And then these 5, which are all quite blue, I feel like I've had for quite a while, and this one probably the shortest time. This is Creating Freedom, Power, Control and the Fight for Our Future by Raoul Martinez. And the reason I haven't picked this up is because it's long and I'm intimidated by it. I think it's around, yeah, nearly 500 pages and like very small text, lots of text. Jen picked me this one up and it sounds like the exact type of book I would love and adore, so it's a very good choice. But yeah, I'm always scared by it because I feel like it could take me a couple of weeks to read. But I'm also fearful of like leaving it too long, because I think it's one of those books that could date the longer I leave it. So have you read this? And if you have, what did you think of it? Then I have Beyond the Pale, Folklore Family and the Mystery of Our Hidden Genes by Emily Urquhart. This is another one I started, I was really enjoying. This was quite a few years ago. For whatever reason I didn't finish. I also think this one could be quite a quick read. Then we have Whose Story Is This? Old Conflicts, New Chapters by Rebecca Solnit. I've read one other book by Rebecca Solnit, I think it might be Unexplained Things to Me, which I enjoyed, and this is quite a short one, just a few essays I think, so there's that. And I would like to read all of Rebecca Solnit's books, so I do just need to get to it. And then another one I started and didn't finish is Wasted, Coming Back from Addiction to Starvation by Marya Hornbacher. This is a memoir. I think she has a few memoirs actually, and the reason I didn't finish this is because, again, it has very small text and I think it just sort of put me off reading more of it. So, but I was really enjoying it. I thought it was absolutely beautifully written, so I do need to go back to this one. And I do love memoirs, and it's probably one of the memoirs that, well, the memoir that sat on my shelf for the longest, which seems a shame. And then I also have another essay collection that is Bitch Doctrine, Essays for Dissenting Adults by Laurie Penny. I picked this up in an indie bookstore a few years ago, and read a couple of pages and really liked it, and haven't read it. And again, I think I haven't read this one because I haven't really heard anyone talk about it. I'm not reminded to pick it up, and so it's just sort of sat on my shelves and been ignored for probably at least 3 years at this point. So have you read it? Did you enjoy it? Now on to the library books. Now of the 6 books here, only one of them is a memoir, which seems quite odd for me because I usually have more memoirs than sort of more general non-fiction. But actually in this stack of 20, there's not many memoirs, which feels quite odd. But maybe that's why some of them have sat for a bit longer, because I feel like I tend to reach for memoirs more than I reach for like more general non-fiction. Because I always feel like general non-fiction is going to take me longer to read, and also I always feel like, oh, most of my reading is done between like 8 and like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm always like, oh, it's too late to like read like serious depressing stuff. And that doesn't make any sense, because whenever I do read serious / depressing stuff at that time of night, I love it just as much. So yeah, does anyone else feel that way about non-fiction? So the memoir I have is Aftershocks, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Identity by Nadia Owusu. I've heard really great things about this one. I like this cool cover, and this is about the author's identity. She's grown up as a woman of many languages, homelands and identities, and Aftershocks is her account of how she hauled herself out of the wreckage. And yeah, I've just heard nothing but positive things about it, although I haven't heard as many sort of bookish or booktube people talk about it as I thought. I've seen it a lot in like articles and in like, you know, like BuzzFeed's most anticipated list and things like that. So there is that one. Have you read it? And then these ones are all, well, I have one essay collection, which is Our Woman on the Ground, essays by Arab women reporting from the Arab world. I think who's it edited by? Zhra, Hankir, and yeah, there's like I think 20 essays maybe in here. I have read the first 2 and really enjoyed it, so I do want to carry on with this one and finish it before I have to return it. And then these ones are sort of more general non-fiction books. This one is a classic. This was published, I think, yeah, in 1971. Open Veins of Latin America, 5 Centuries of the Pillage of a Continent by Eduardo Galeano? Apologies, I think it's probably Galeano. And I'm always a bit dubious about reading a book that's like 50 years old, especially when it's to do with history, because I feel like maybe, you know, we may have misunderstood some things then, and since then, you know, learn more about those topics. But this one's still really celebrated, still republished and things like that. So, and I really want to learn more about Latin America because I feel like I know next to nothing. So would like to read that one. Although it does intimidate me because I don't know anything, and because it's a book that's 50 years old, it does scare me a bit. If you've read it and really enjoyed it, then let me know, because I think I need some encouragement. This next one is going to be a difficult read, but it's one that I think I'll really get on with in terms of writing style and tone, and that is The Way We Survive, Notes on Rape Culture by Catriona Morton. And yeah, I read the first few pages of like every book when I get it, whether that's a book I buy or borrow from the library, and when I read the first few pages of this one, I just found it really readable, and I think I'll really enjoy how she writes about this topic, even though I think it'll be a really difficult read. So there's that one. And then we have How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America by Clint Smith. I just really want to read this one. I think it's going to be super informative, and I really in particular like the sound of the fact that this focuses on monuments and landmarks and talks about the sort of hidden past, so the things that America as a country are trying to hide, and you know, don't write on these plaques. And that's a discussion that's been happening a lot in Britain in the last couple of years as well, to do with statues and monuments here, and it's a topic that I find really interesting. So I think in the context of slavery in America, looking at all those monuments and landscapes will be really interesting. And then I've had this one out from the library for a couple of months now, and again just haven't picked it up because it's a serious non-fiction book and I'm always worried that I'll take longer to read it, but have read the first few pages probably 3 times now, find it really readable, have no real excuse. And that is Biracial Britain, A Different Way of Looking at Race by Remi Adekoya. So this author is the son of a Nigerian father and a Polish mother who's now living in Britain, and he says that mixed race Britons are the country's fastest growing minority group. By the end of the century, roughly 1 in 3 of the population will be mixed race, but it's still not treated as a unique identity. And then it talks about sort of the history of racism as related to mixed race people in Britain, and talking about the formation of you know, new identities in Britain. So yeah, I think this will be an interesting one, quite a specific topic that I would definitely like to know more about. And then lastly, I've got the 6 books that I have either bought or been sent this year, and the first 2 I was sent from the publishers. So the first one is Crippled, Austerity and the Demonisation of Disabled People by Frances Ryan. This is actually quite a short book. I've not heard many people talk about it, but the people I have heard talk about it said it was really informative and really readable. And this focuses on disabled people in Britain, fully updated to include the coronavirus update. I didn't realise that. It tells the stories of those most affected by the devastating regime. It is at once both a damaging indictment of a safety net so compromised it strangles many of those it catches, and a passionate demand for a true end to austerity which hits hardest those most in need. And I feel like I'd really like more context to do with disabled people in the UK in particular, and the history of the way people with disabilities have been treated, and how they're being treated in sort of current policies as well. So I'm hoping this book will give me like an introduction to that topic. And then the other one is a memoir, that is Gears for Queers by Abigail, Melton and Lillith Cooper. So I think Abigail and Lillith are a couple, and they love cycling, and I think they travelled around Europe on their cycles along flat fens and up Swiss Alps. They make new friends and exercise old demons as they push their bodies and their relationship to the limit. This frank look at mental health and the challenges of staying true to yourself whilst travelling offers a fresh perspective on the familiar bicycle tour. I really like the idea of memoirs that are focused on travel. This one seems quite specific in that it's focused on a couple, so it's written by 2 people, which isn't something I experience very often, and also it's focused on cycling, which is something I do not do, but really like the idea of. So I'm hoping this will maybe inspire me to actually get back on a bike. We shall see. And then I have a couple of memoirs that I think I've hauled on the channel quite recently, so I won't talk about them too much, although this one has a very beautiful cover, and it is Carrie, a memoir of survival on stolen land by Toni Jensen. I definitely want to read this one during Non-Fiction November. So this one is about an Indigenous woman growing up in America, told in snapshots of the author's encounters with gun violence. And again, read the first few pages. This one is super readable and it's got really high ratings on Goodreads, so I'm hoping it could be a favourite. And one that just focuses on all the topics that I love. This is Girlhood by Melissa Phoebos. This is a memoir and essays, which is something I really enjoy. Probably one of my favourite, probably is my favourite way to experience a memoir. I really like memoirs and essays, and this focuses on, like I said, girlhood, growing up, female identity, empowerment, body politics, all those things. And I've always meant to read this author's work, and I think I'm going to love this. I'll be very disappointed if this isn't a 5-star read. I feel like I've really built this one up. So yeah, have you read it? Was it 5 stars for you? And the last two are sort of more serious, sort of general non-fiction books. And again, like I've said, these are the type of books I tend to not find the time for, because I think they're going to be more serious and I need to have like more brain power, and inevitably I don't, like, in the evenings after work I'll be like, oh, I'm too tired to read this, and then at the weekends I'll be like, it's the weekend, like I should read something easy. So I never like make the time, but I would really like to read both these books. I feel like I need to know much more about both these topics, so this is hopefully going to be a good starting place. So this is Dispatches from Syria, The Morning They Came For Us by Janine Di Giovanni. This is quite a short book. This journalist had been working in the Middle East for more than 2 decades. She covered the Syria story since the start of the uprising in 2011, travelling in the country between 2012 and 2016. I've heard amazing things about this one, and I think it's supposed to be quite accessible. And then another one with very small font is The 100 Years War on Palestine, A History of Settler, Colonial Conquest and Resistance by Rashid Khalidi. So I definitely want to read, you know, this book probably more on this topic, because I tried to read loads of information online that were giving like the 100-year history, and I genuinely felt like it lacked any context. It would reference other people or events that I didn't know of, and I was like, I definitely just need to read like a full-length book about this, probably many, and like having looked into that, this one seemed like the one that would be the most accessible, but also just, you know, I've heard really good things about it. And yeah, I'm being put off this a little bit because it has really small, tightly packed font. I just don't know why publishers ever decided to do this, especially with like a more serious, difficult read. There's already that, and then to sort of add to that, to make us have to really strain our eyes to read it, is just a tad annoying, and has stopped me from reading this. I've had it for a few months now, but again, I'll be annoyed if I get to the end of the year and haven't read this one, so convince me to read it. So yeah, those are all of my non-fiction books that I have currently. Like I said, I have a wish list with hundreds of non-fiction books on there. I have a Scribd account with probably 100 non-fiction books on audio saved. I think I have about 10 more books on reserve at the library that are non-fiction, but they're not here yet, so I'm just going to focus on these 20, and it'd be really great if you could let me know if you've read them, if you liked them or didn't like them, and which ones you think I should prioritise reading in Non-Fiction November. So yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know down below if you have any TBR plans for Non-Fiction November. Always love to talk about more books, of course. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!